Hey, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Again, I know it's been said, but it's so good to see everyone's faces. I'm Roslyn. I'm Diet and Pat's daughter. And
I'm Katie. I'm the newest member to the family, everybody.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you. I'm also a Hayes. Not a Hayes with an E, but a Hayes with Hayes with an E. Not with an E, but I'm happy to be here.
Yay. Yeah. So we're going to be moderating today, asking these lovely folks some questions. We'll get started. So if we could have you just each introduce yourself and share your age. We'll go ahead and start with that.
Well, I guess that I should give you my full name, Shirley Ann Hayes Kohler, and I'm 90. I will be 90 in September the 18th.
Woo!
You're next.
Okay. I'm Mabel Catherine Hayes Bubalo, and I was 90 in February of this past year. So I'm going on 95. I was 94, going on 95. Welcome to the 90s.
You know, most of the ladies don't remember the year, but they remember the date of what day it was, see? But they can't remember the year. Well, I can remember both of them. I had an older brother, and right now he'd be 101. And I am 98, May the 23rd. And my mother always said, you know, he was 3 years old when I was born. So by the time I got 3 years old and was able to walk and run along behind him, why, he was 6. My mother says, you know, you were born, the minute you were born, you hit the floor running. And you've never stopped.
That's true. That's true. And just so that you all know, we did have another brother, and that was James Frederick Hayes. And he was just 2 years older than I am, so he would be 92 in October. Mm-hmm. So.
By the way, he was the good-looking one, too.
He was.
Can I ask
All the curly hair.
Yeah, he did. Well, Todd right today
Well,
looks,
yeah.
don't he?
Yeah.
Can I ask everybody, since I'm new, where was everybody born? Can you talk about where you were born?
I was born in a farmhouse just, let's see, it would have been east of Glenwood, about, 5 miles?
Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I was born in a farmhouse somewhere between Greentop, Missouri, and Kirksville.
Wow.
And I was born in the country, in the same house, probably.
Yeah.
And I think when we left there, you were about, 2 or 3?
3.
And I was 5 or 6, probably 6.
Okay.
Because I helped take care of Jim when we moved. I remember that.
Yeah, he was a baby.
He was a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you moved to the Grammy and Granddad's, Mabel and Bryce's first house. Is that right?
They're east
Where
of
I
Glenwood,
was born.
north of Malvern.
North of Malvern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Farmhouse that was pretty poor.
Yeah. Can you talk about that, the living conditions in that house?
Well, let's put it this way. On a snowy winter day, you had to watch it. You'd be in the snow and you got out of bed.
Yeah.
Now, the windows were tight in the summertime, but in the wintertime, they were very loose.
Plus, can you remember getting up on the bed that Dad and maybe Bill were chasing rats from the basement that somehow got upstairs, and all of us kids we were up on the bed trying to stay away from the varmints. So it wasn't the best.
And at that time, linoleum was used instead of carpets. And if you've been around the linoleum in the wintertime, you have quite a nice lip clear around the outside. So you had to hit the floor, then step over it, and
So,
it was cold.
and what did you do for heat, for electricity, to stay warm?
There wasn't electricity.
Wasn't no heat upstairs.
No. So it was wood and coal we
Yeah,
used.
mostly wood.
Yeah.
And when we first moved to that area, it was all green wood that was cut. The only time you got hot was when you was cutting the wood.
Was there indoor plumbing at this house?
No. No indoor plumbing or anything else, really.
There was no running water or anything.
No.
No.
And I can remember Dad, he used to go down, there was a woods not very far away from us, and he would go down to hunt for wild turkey and things like that, so we'd have meat to eat.
Tell them some of your chores. So some of the chores you guys had to do as children on the farm.
Well, which farm? I mean,
Well,
the farm they're talking about, I wasn't even
you
born
weren't
yet.
even there.
So I don't remember any of that.
Yeah, right. Well, some of the chores on this first farm I can remember, we always had a lot of threshers during harvest time. And so the women would all come together to make dinner, and after they fed everyone, part of my job was to cut the lemons to make lemonade. And then in the afternoon, the women made sandwiches to take out to the field, to the men that were working out in the field. And so once again, I cut the lemons to make the lemonade. And it would be maybe like 24 lemons that you had to cut and squeeze at a time to make enough lemonade. Yeah.
And I was usually about that time was water boy.
Yeah.
And we had one of the old gallon jugs with a tied by a gunny sack around it to keep it cool. You kept that wet, and then she'd fill that full of lemonade or water, and we'd take it to the people that were working at the thresh machine. And by the way, it was by foot, not by saddle horse.
Right. Lots of walking.
Grammy, talk about your experience growing up in the first house you were living in.
It was south of Malvern and east of the farm now that is called the Hayes Farm. And it was a two-story. There again, we had, all of us kids were upstairs. We had one grate in the girls' room that was between the two floors, and that was our heat. And lots of times, if we wanted to hear what Mom and Dad were talking about, we would all lay around the grate and listen.
What were they saying?
I can't remember, honey. But, you know,
You
we
kids
all,
get in bed's what he'd say.
well, and he didn't say it kindly. One of the things that I remember was the kitchen. And, you know, right now, we all think we have to have these wonderful kitchens. My mother put out one of the best meals that was ever put out, and she had a little tiny place to make anything that was baked. We had running water, a pump, and one great big sink. That was the only sink in the whole house. Her stove was heated with cobs or coal or wood, and she would, if she was baking something, and by the way, she baked bread every day, I think, she'd put her hand in there, and I can remember saying, well, it's not quite ready. Huh. I mean, you know, how do you tell when it's not quite ready? I don't know. But she was a great cook, and we had wonderful meals. No electricity, no bathrooms, you know, but I'll tell you what, she made a home of it. I could still remember her papering the ceilings and the wall,
Right.
and she would take that, she'd get that roll of paper, paste it, and she'd take a broom, she'd get it started, and she'd just go right down the top of the ceiling, and it was perfect. It was beautiful. So we had quite a life there.
Yes, we did.
Well, there's one little thing that when Annie started to school, we we had quite a little ways to walk, and my brother Bill, the older one, him and I would grab her by the arm when
We were late for the bus, what was it?
when it was late for the bus or when it was muddy, and she'd never touch the ground till she got to the bus.
I think we just,
And it was a good quarter, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a good quarter of a mile.
Can you talk a little bit about Grammy Hayes' garden and growing your own food?
Oh,
And
yeah,
how-
yeah.
Kathy, take over.
We had a huge strawberry patch, which I liked the best. It was really large, and we grew our own strawberries. We grew beans, butter beans, green beans, carrots, anything you could grow. We pretty much grew, and I especially remember that this was not in the garden. This was down in the field someplace. The watermelon patch. And you guys would take the truck or the wagon down to pick up the ripe watermelons and cantaloupe and bring them up to the house. And we put them in the cellar to keep them cool.
Or cold water,
Yeah,
milk,
yeah.
milk
Right,
tank.
right, in the milk tank. Yeah. That's not the only thing we did in the milk tank, right?
Yeah.
Well, this would be Ann and Jim.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hated the garden, I'll just say it. I think I must have learned to crawl in the garden, and it didn't make any difference what I pulled up. My mother would say, "You pulled up the wrong thing, Ann, it's not a weed." So, but she did, that was, it was very important to our survival, was that garden.
Right.
And she not only did we have fresh, wonderful, fresh food all the time, but she canned. As soon as it started getting where she could put something in a can and preserve it, boy, she did it. And that was just all summer long, all
Right.
summer long.
Right.
We had our own fruit, our own vegetables, I've seen them butcher a hog, I've seen them butcher a cow, and
A steer.
a steer, yeah, well, whatever. And, and it, you know, it was a way of life, and we survived very well.
They also canned the meat too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
That was the vegetables.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're talking about surviving. So this was the era of the Great Depression, is that right?
That farm was right after the Depression was over.
Right.
So kind of talk about living through that and what that experience was like and coming out of it.
Okay. My mother, we used to buy, they used to buy feed in great big feed sacks. And she would buy, they were feed sacks that were kind of like calico now.
They were
And
all printed, weren't they?
Yeah, they were all printed, all different kinds of prints. And she would pick out enough sacks that matched each other that she could make my dresses out of those. And then we had an Aunt Laura, that lived in St. Louis. And she would send all of her old coats and things like that. And my mother would take them all apart and press them real nice. And then she would make our coats out of that. Wow. Our coats and our winter things. Wow. So that was part of the Depression, you know. That
the reason that they moved from Missouri to Iowa was because of the Depression.
Right.
And Dad borrowed, well, there's different, I hear different amounts, but he always told me, he said, I borrowed $50 from the Bank of Kirksville to move the family, and they moved in one truck, right?
Yeah.
I was still just a twinkle in his eye.
Yeah. What do you remember about that time, Al?
Well, that was but the time that the Depression was really the deepest is when we got into the milk business. And Glenwood State School there had all of those cows. At one time, they decided to get rid of all the cows. So the banker told Dad, he says, you ought to buy these cows. And Bill and I, of course, we milking 1 or 2 cows, we didn't know how to milk. But he bought cows anyway. And so I think he bought maybe 30 of them. I don't know how many. I can't remember the number, but it seemed to me like a lot more than we needed. But he also got a milk, I'm not going to say a milk route, but he got a contract with Robert's Dairy here in Omaha when Roberts was still here. And so we got to the point during that time that we were sending 15 10-gallon milk cans to Omaha every day. And we was milking part of the time that this was before milkers, and so we were milking most of those with hands, by
Twice a
hand.
day.
Yeah, twice a day. And the cows would stand there at the door waiting for you. It's time to milk. So it was one of those deals like the cows knew exactly that it was time in the morning with a lantern every day. At night, usually it got dark before we got done. And no electricity on the farm. And so everything was done with a lantern.
Wow.
And to finish this complete story, I was out of high school about the time that they were still producing lots of milk. And it was good. I mean, it paid good, or he wouldn't have kept at it. But when I had to go to service, why, him and the hired man was left with milk and all the cows. It didn't last 2 weeks. He sold a whole bunch. That's the first time I ever knew I amounted to anything.
Well, and about that time, Bill and Retta had gotten married, and Ned moved on to the big farm, so.
Yeah, and they had their cows.
Yeah, they had their cows to milk, so.
So looking back on that time, is there anything you didn't expect or couldn't have imagined for your modern life to have now? I know you kind of talked about the kitchen appliances, but what else is perhaps a modern convenience of today that you couldn't have imagined back then?
A refrigerator.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think that was
Freeze.
you're probably right. The first thing, and it would be the last thing to go if they had to get rid of anything, would be the refrigerator.
Yeah.
We bought a Survey refrigerator that ran on kerosene, didn't it? The first buds.
I don't remember
Yeah.
that one, Al.
I just remember an ice box. that
Yeah, we had
to
on the
put
back porch,
ice-
yeah,
That we had to put ice in.
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
back porch, yeah.
But the first
So-
refrigerators was a kerosene refrigerator, Survey. They still make them with propane and natural
We
gas.
kept everything in the cellar.
Yeah,
You know,
to keep
that
cold.
was
Yeah.
one of your jobs, was
Yeah.
to run up and down the steps of the
Right.
cellar.
Yeah. And the cellar was about as far as from here to maybe the back of this wall. So, yeah.
Go outside.
So winter, summer, storm or whatever. Oh, and we would go to the cellar if there was a storm. Like if there were tornadoes in the area. And I remember one time we all got in the cellar, and my mother looked around, and she says, well, where's Bill? He was upstairs in bed, asleep. Remember that? And there was a storm, a tornado coming.
And I remember that Dad would always stand at the door of the cellar, and I'd watch between his legs as the tornado would move up through the field.
Sit on the deck back then too.
And I liked to play on top of that cellar. I got where I had a two before that we could walk right up. And I even had all the cats trained so they'd go up there and sit on top of that cellar with me.
Where else did you like to play?
The hay mow.
Oh, yes, the hay mow was wonderful.
The barn was, it was open. If you went upstairs to where the hay was, it was an open square. And there was ropes that brought the hay up the side of the barn and dumped them in the hay mow. And we'd get on those ropes and swing across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And jump into a pile of hay down below. And
Maybe
now,
you did.
now I'm going to tell,
I said, maybe you did. I didn't do that.
I did. I'm going to tell you a story about Al with that hay mow. Our cousin Richard was there, and Uncle Vic, his dad, and I imagine Bessie too, the whole family. Well, they got ready to go home, and so that nobody could find the boys. Nobody could find Al or Richard or Jim. Well, Jim was the youngest, so he was the one that was operating these ropes. You know, what we're talking about is the big claw that comes down out of the end of the barn and gets a pile of hay or a hay bale and pulls it back up. Well, this is the ropes they were riding on, back and forth. Well, they couldn't find the boys, and so Uncle Vic says, Richard. Jim got scared and let go of the rope, and it threw them both out the end of the barn. I've never seen Dad and Vic move so fast in my life.
Fun though.
It was fun. Oh.
Lots of things about living on the farm were fun. There was a lot of work involved because everyone had a job, you know.
But I will tell you one other thing that it's still hard to believe. Dad got a pension from World War I, $12.
Wow.
And that bought the necessity of groceries, like flour, coffee,
Yeah,
and whatever.
yeah.
Strictly the 3 or 4 things is all they bought. But that for both families.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
So when you say both families, that was our Uncle Vic and
Yeah.
his family.
Yeah.
Plus our family.
And
Wow.
probably bought Uncle Vic smoking,
Yeah, oh,
because Dad never smoked.
Did you have any pets?
We had pets.
Yeah, we always had a dog too, didn't we?
dogs, dogs and cats.
The first dog I remember was Pee-wee. We had lots of cats.
We did that.
I know that we had one big old tomcat that would sit on the fence post and swipe at Dad as he'd go out the gate every morning. And finally, he said, "Come on, boys." He says, "We're going to sack all these cats up and take them across the river." Well, I don't know how long it took them to sack all those cats up, but they took them across the river. And Dad went on in town, and by the time he got back, all the cats were back.
Yeah. But
And we made our own fun.
yes, we did. The boys used to make all of the cows Remember how you used to name all the cows?
Yeah,
Yeah,
And-
old Mickey Mouse. You
yeah,
remember that old
Yeah.
baby?
yeah.
She'd eat the back right off of your shirt, right off the back of your.
Oh,
Yeah, you're gonna tell it, aren't you?
you know, we had a milk cooler up above the cattle water tank. And the cold water run into this milk cooler first and then drained into the cattle tank.
There was a wire across.
Yeah,
So that the
there was a
cattle.
wire across there so the cattle couldn't only get so far in. And so Ann would would go out there and stand on that where the
I'd swing on it across the. I'd grab a hold of that wire and swing on it.
and these old cows, they got used to her. They'd grab
They grabbed the tail of my dress and damn near ate it off of me. And this fool,
and
not me,
Him.
he stood out there and just laughed.
they'd drop her in the.
I
then
was so mad at him.
They dropped her in the water. Yeah, it was. To everybody, it was funny, but her. And they look forward to coming back too.
I bet they did.
She'd sweat just enough that anything that they tasted was salty.
Yeah.
So those old
Yeah.
cows, boy, did they looked forward to seeing her.
So lots of kids, lots of birthdays. How did you celebrate your birthdays?
We didn't.
That's
We
right.
didn't have parties like they do now. I think Mom always tried to make a cake for her birthday. And so it was strictly family. And I don't even remember that we got toys. I
No.
don't
Oh,
remember.
no.
I don't think there were any toys.
I can remember one toy that I got, and that was a doll. And Mom made all the clothes for this doll. And I don't think I ever played with that doll because I was afraid I would do something to it. Because we just didn't get toys.
Yeah.
If we got anything, it was a game that we could all play.
Right. Yeah.
So,
But a lot of times for Christmas, there'd be an orange
Oh, yeah.
or
Yeah.
bigger apple
Yeah.
than what we raised on the farm. But otherwise, that was probably it, wasn't it?
Yeah. Plenty of food. We always had enough food. There was never,
we always had a lot of people around.
yeah, we did.
It might not have been what you liked.
But
you know,
it's what you ate.
to eat.
Yeah.
It might not have been what you liked, but we never was out, never went hungry.
No, no.
And after we got to where we was having really good cold milk, well, there's very little, it was so much colder than the water, we drink milk. And so I still got almost all my teeth today.
Yeah.
Well, you first four got all the Mom's calcium. I don't have any teeth.
Are we just now hearing that?
Yeah, no. I think I've heard that before. Not from Mom, but from you.
Well, do you remember the time that you and I and Jim were gonna play house on top of the
Oh, yeah.
chicken coop? Because it had a flat roof. And the only way we could get up there was Jim pounded nails in the side of it. Well, I could
Yeah.
never climb up. You two had to get me up there.
We're gonna lift you up.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Jim had this hammer. Should have known that that was not a good thing. Anyway, he gets the nails in. He gets up there and he's hammering around all over to make sure, but There was no nails sticking out of this roof.
And I was saying, Jim, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be doing that.
And she kept me from crawling up there. Of course, I could only get so far. And all of a sudden, Jim hit a wasp nest with his hammer. And I mean to tell you, I've never seen him move that fast in my life, or anybody else. He ran off the end of that thing, just flew right in the air, and by the time he hit the ground, those wasps had stung him all over his face.
His face and his arms.
And our mother called the doctor, and she says, I don't think he's going to live if I can't get all this venom out of his. He says, do you have onions in your garden? She says, well, of course I have onions. He says, you get those onions, you cut them, and fine slices, thin slices, and lay them all over where those wasp things are. And when they get dry, replace them. And you know those onions pulled all those wasp things out, and it saved his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we played dangerously.
Yes, we used to go out in the barn when Dad still had a few work horses, and he would have them in the stalls in the barn. And we'd get ears of corn and put them in the trough in front of the horses. And we'd climb up the side of the stall and get over on the horse and pretend like we were riding. And if Ann couldn't get there, we just plopped her over on top of him.
My feet were just like this. That's how broad those horses were.
Yeah, they were big horses. They were work horses. You didn't know we were doing that, did you? You were out in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to tell them about when you and Bill started going out in the field.
I started driving the tractor when I was 8 years old,
Wow.
and started out mowing hay, something relatively easy. Well, besides that, I couldn't crank a tractor, so somebody had to start it for me. And so I could mow hay, I could rake hay, and then Dad says, well, you're getting good enough. He says, there's no reason you can't plow corn. And I think I did, out.
Yeah.
Plowed some of it out. And of course that, you know
Bill put it in and you plowed it out.
you kind of know how good that went over.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, I worked in the field from the time I was 8 years old. Besides coming in after a day's work and milking for 2 hours.
Wow.
And I tell you, there's one thing that when I went to the Navy, I weighed 130 pounds. I was 5'8". And before I got out of the Navy, when I got into the Navy SEALs, they wanted everybody with close to that same weight and height. So my crew was all 130 pounds and 5'8". We were blackened up. You couldn't tell one from the other. And that's just about what a Japanese is. We wasn't smart enough to figure out that that's where we were headed. So, but also, you had to be able to lift double your weight. You had to be able to lift a 250-pound man or 150-pound man on your back and carry him 1.5 miles. Or you didn't make it. It was just that simple. And so being brought up on the farm as always hard work. Never an ounce of fat on any of us kids, was it? You know, because you worked it all. And at the time, when they would have 4-H meetings and they'd have county fairs, we never went to the county fairs. We were always too busy. Yeah.
We did go to a lot of movies, though.
Yeah, we did that at night. Yeah.
Do you have any memorable movies that you saw?
Do we what?
Memorable movies. Do you remember any of the movies that we saw? No.
Abbott and Costello was on a lot of them.
Well, any movie that had Alice Faye in it, because Dad really liked Alice Faye.
One of the
So,
things
yeah.
I remember when Shirley Temple was very popular,
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
they made sure that you girls got to see Shirley Temple
Yeah.
movies. Yeah. And I don't remember a whole too much about the different ones.
Oh,
So,
Any other favorite memories that you want to share? Anything?
on the farm.
Well, high school, you know, was kind of, well, for the first place, we went to country school to start with.
oh, yeah.
And then when we moved there south of Malvern, this is backing it up 6-8 years, why, we got to ride the school bus to a consolidated school. That's the first place that I can ever remember that they had running water. Everything was heated, even hot running water.
Yeah,
And the restrooms and everything were,
inside.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they were heated.
Yeah,
And quite nice, really. After
right. Well, to back up before that, because when I first started to school, we were riding a horse to school. And Bill, all three of us rode on one horse. Bill was in front and I was in the middle. Guess who had the tail end? The caboose. And
She was scared to death, wasn't she, dear?
probably.
I know. And I can,
Hold on for
'cause
dear
this,
life.
This wasn't a, now, this was not a pony. This was a real
Oh,
horse.
yeah, it was a big horse. Well, and if it saw a tumbleweed, which it did ever so often, guess where the caboose went? Hal would fly off the back end, but I was hanging on to Bill, so I was safe. I don't remember
And we
going
walked-
off, but
we-
you did.
It was down 34 too.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah,
You remember when,
Yeah.
well, of course you don't. When 34 went underneath the railroad,
yeah.
before they
Yeah.
built
The railroad
34 that
bridge.
comes over the railroad now. They're east of Glenwood, east of Glenwood, north of Malvern. Yeah.
I know the area, but I don't know if I remember. Yeah. But that's how you
So,
went to
and
school?
yeah, we went underneath that railroad, rode that horse all the way in.
Right.
Over to the next mile. And I was just telling the kids coming up here today that I remember one particular time, I was probably in maybe 5th grade, maybe. And it was a nice Christmas. And they always had a Christmas program. So we were at this Christmas program. Well, it was nice enough out that all the boys went outside. Well, it wasn't good enough to play with out there where all the cars were. So we went across the highway and there was a bunch of trees over there. And we thought we seen somebody hanging in this tree. So we rushes over there real quick and tells our dads, you know, I think there's a man hanging over there in the tree. Oh, you kids, there's something wrong with all of you. And by golly, they went over and looked with a flashlight, and there was a man hanging in the tree, dead. And I remember that as if it was yesterday.
I don't remember. Oh, of
that.
course I do.
But I was telling them this morning,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's very interesting that Bill and Kathy, Bill particularly, never really liked horses.
No,
And you never rode.
Not really.
And Al
Al
loved
did.
horses.
Yeah.
I remember
Oh.
him riding a horse as hard as he could ride it.
this was a big saddle horse. And,
Dan was his name.
yeah. He had worked in the stockyards here in Omaha. And Dad got a hold of him some way. I think he bought him from Piper there in town.
Could be.
And this horse was smart enough that he could just walk up to a gate and raise the latch, push the gate open with his nose, walk through.
He'd probably been trained to do
push,
that.
Push the gate shut. And so several times he would do that at home in the barn doors.
Yeah.
And the first thing you know, he had cattle all over the
Mills
whole
County.
farm. And I can remember Dad threatened to shoot that horse, but he wouldn't dare. But on Sunday, Bill would sit down and read a magazine or a book. And boy, that's one thing I didn't have time to read. And so if I got bored, I'd go out and get the saddle horse. And I don't know if you've ever been in out where the ground gets soft in the spring and there's ice under it from the winter. And so it didn't make any difference when it was. I would ride that horse. And we would chase jackrabbits in the summertime till the jackrabbits would just lay down. You could have went and picked them up if you wanted to. That saddle horse could just run them till they were just totally exhausted. And I always rode him without a bridle.
Now, when you're talking about a jackrabbit, most of them don't know what a jackrabbit is. This is not a bunny.
No.
4 times as big as a regular bunny.
Yeah, with big ears.
Yeah, and they sound like a man stomping his feet. And so, anyway, a lot of Sunday afternoons when they were all sitting down reading the paper, and I would take the saddle horse and out and ride him. And Dad said, make sure you give him plenty of exercise. Well, that worked all the time. You know, it come up a rain one afternoon real quick, and him and I was chasing him across the pasture, and there was a little stream of water running down along here, and he didn't know that there was that stream of water. Well, boy, we were just as fast as he could run, and he come up to that, and he stopped. I didn't. And so I looked like I'd been rolling in the mud. There's times later in life that same horse, why he fell down with me several different times. With that dirt would move underneath his. We had horseshoes on him, and Mom would say, every time you and him go out, one of you don't look so good when you come back. But Bill just didn't, that wasn't his thing.
No, he liked the tractors.
And he would rather read a magazine.
Yeah.
So you all grew up with the land, with the farm. What is your relationship to the land now?
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know exactly how to explain it. To me, the farm is always and will always be a part of my heritage. It's a part of who I am. And I think it's Actually, I think it's part of what the Hayes family's all about. And I don't know that I can really put it into words any better than that. Can you, either of you?
Well, I have a deep respect for farmers and the land itself. I have a deep respect for the ability of our farmers in this country. They not only feed the people of our country, but they really feed the world. And when you think of it that way, I think the farmers have lacked a deep amount of respect from the rest of the world for a long time. And I feel like that is something in the more recent years has come back into its own. People are beginning to realize how important our food system is and how important it is to respect the farmer, the agriculture business, whether it's growing corn or in the fields of Iowa and Nebraska, or is it growing fruit in California? You know, I think there's more of a respect for farming than there's ever been.
Well, the thing that I think, it's a heritage that
Hard work.
that is strictly this generation that's here today. Most of them don't realize what a hard life it took to get it. This is something to be proud of.
Right.
And although I'm not involved in it, I'm just as proud of it as if I lived there. And when I left for the service, I left from that farm. And when I came back, in the meantime, the folks had sold the cows. They had moved to Malvern, and their house had burnt
That's true.
on Christmas Eve, wasn't
And we were living in Glenwood.
it? In
yeah.
Christmas Eve.
Right.
Well, then they had moved to Glenwood. And the unit I was in, we might get mail in 3 months and we might not. And so I didn't even know that they'd moved. I didn't know they had a fire for 6 months or later after it had happened. Well, when I came home, of course they had moved away from the farm that I was raised up on. And so when I got off the train in Council Bluffs, the cabbie says, "Where do you want to go, sailor?" And I said, "To Glenwood." Okay, we got in Glenwood. He says, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I don't know." So there's a cafe or something that still had a light on, so I got the phone book and I called them. But they knew I was in the country somewhere because they knew the name of the ship, and they had seen it in the Omaha paper that the ship had docked in New York City.
We just didn't know how close you were. Yeah.
No.
Then you called from the cafe down the street.
Well, to extend that a little bit, you know, I'm not a complaining and I'm not bragging, but I didn't fit any place. I didn't fit at home. I didn't fit living with my brother. I just plain didn't fit. I was a misfit. No kidding about it. I hated myself because I couldn't come back down to earth to be an ordinary civilian. And I contemplated time after time rejoining, because that's where I belonged. I had so extensive training that there wasn't, I don't know if there was 100 that had trained to be a Navy SEAL scout or not. I don't know. But we were trained, many of our admirals have told us that we were the best trained group that ever was in the military. We did things that was absolutely impossible for anybody else to do and not get caught. And it was always at night. And you could bet you was going to swim one way or the other. You was either going to swim in or you was going to swim back out, or both ways. And like I've told the boys here earlier, some of them, that I couldn't swim a stroke till I went to the Navy. And I told them that, and they said, good.
We're going to teach you the right way.
We will teach you what we want you to know. And finally, I could swim the 100 yards. They liked that. And well, I wasn't good at it, but I could still swim the 100 yards. And so one morning, now we had an instructor for every 3 guys that was in training. And that instructor lived with you. He ate with you. If you run 10 miles, he run 10 miles. If you swim 100 yards, he swim 100 yards. And it didn't make any difference how deep the crap got, he was there with you. And not only to see that you did it right, but he would stop just abruptly like this and say, what did I say? Our memory lessons taught us that you listened to every word that was said. And when we went on a mission, everything was by sign. We never talked a word. We couldn't write a thing down. You had to remember everything that you seen, and it was never a word said until we got back aboard and they debriefed us. For 1 hour, they took each one of us in separately and debriefed us entirely. By the way, this had nothing to farm. So coming back to it, no, I had trouble of coming back down to earth. I admit that. I had a school teacher that was teaching school, or not teaching school, but going to school in San Jose, California, which is Stanford. And our ship had come into San Diego or San Francisco, and we were there going to be there 5 days. And so I called the school teacher, and she says, I don't have gas enough to come up and get you, but she says, I will bring you back tomorrow morning. If you can get an overnight, I will cook a home-cooked dinner. Well, I hadn't heard anything like that for so long, I wasn't sure what it would be. And she did. And when I got off the bus, well, they were waiting for me. And she says, first thing she says, boy, am I glad you wore your dress blues. And I said, oh? And she said, I've got signed up to have your picture taken. And I forgot to tell her that I was not supposed to have any pictures taken. And so I told her afterwards that I said, you can't even send a photo.
But she did.
Anything. Did she?
I think she did.
Ahead of time?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and the last thing that they told us before we docked coming in, you Scouts and Raiders, don't forget anything that you know what you got to do. 'Cause 10 days you're going to be back on combat. And we was.
Well, it's no wonder you had a hard time adjusting back to the farm then.
Well, that was just part of it.
Yeah, I
That was
know,
just
I
a
know,
fraction of it.
I know.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for the generations that are here? Anything you'd like to share? Anything, any hopes you'd like to share, or wisdom you'd like to share with anyone in the room?
Well, I don't know how many people are versed on quite as many things maybe as I am, but I've had kids in high school right there in Red Oak, good-sized high school, come up to me and say, you know, I wouldn't mind belonging to the Navy if I could get into the SEALs. And so, what do you think? I said, I think you don't stand a chance. And they said, well, here's the thing that bothers me more than anything else that anybody says. I said, if war was to break out today, what would you do? Get the first ticket to Canada. This just, it just gets to me. I can't believe us Americans do that. I really can't.
Do you have any advice for the?
Keep on keeping on. Yeah, I think I don't know. One of the boys asked me last night, why do you think, what have you learned from living so long? And I think one of the things is we're meant to love and respect each other. If you do that, learn to, you know, if you grow up in a family that loves one another, spread that love around. Be careful about judging other people. That's not my job. It's not really any of our jobs. That job of judging, I'll leave up to a higher power. And I've always trusted that God has me in his scope. He's with me, he's with my family, he's with all of my loved ones. And I think the important thing is to remember to love each other and to spread that love around.
Well, I think that life's too short to hold grudges.
Right.
And to carry that with you. If you do, it'll eat you alive. So get up, keep moving, keep working, keep busy, keep the brain and the body working. You've all got a wonderful foundation here, and you're all good families, so go forth.
I'll go a little farther with that. You know, you hold a grudge, you're going to hurt one person.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so are we done, or any questions?
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions at all for our elders?
Did they hear you?
Does anyone have any questions at all?
Okay.
And you never talked about your squirrel.
Oh. Oh, boy.
Talk about what?
My squirrel.
Oh. Well, that's probably a good thing.
Well, I got the squirrel when we lived in Glenwood, and there was some of the boys that were up at the Glenwood school up there raided some of the squirrel nests. So I don't know how I got the squirrel, but I got one of their squirrels. And I can remember the look on my mother's face when I brought this home. Just like, I can't believe you. But I
time you
said, so
look,
how do
it
I
was up in
keep
the
this
curtain."
squirrel alive? And she says, well, we need to go get a doll bottle and feed it with that. Well, anyway, it said, Squeaky the squirrel lived. And I think he'd come awful close to eating the house in Glenwood. And he got to the point where he would gnaw on everything. And he would dig holes in her carpet and put the nuts down there, and then she'd vacuum and she'd hear all this. And
Anybody come in, he was always up at the top of the curtain.
yeah. If anybody come in, he would go right up the curtains, her drapes, sit on top and chatter and scold
Boy,
them.
would he ever.
And the one thing that I do remember, and this is completely out of character for our father, we had a trip to Missouri to see the grandparents, which would be most of his great-grandparents. And I talked him into letting me take Squeaky the squirrel. Well, now, you have to, now, our grandmother Hayes was okay with Squeaky the squirrel, but our grandmother Waddell was just a little bit, and, but finally, was just ready to leave, and I went to put Squeaky the squirrel in the car, and Squeaky went up the tree. And you know,
Goodbye, Squeaky.
no, our father sat there until I talked Squeaky down. And he went home with us, and I turned him loose.
I can't imagine it.
It wasn't easy. I turned him loose when we got home, and Mom would lay nuts out on the ledge, and that squirrel would come back and eat them. And he got where he would actually eat nuts out of her hand. But for years, I knew Squeaky was there in Glenwood because he had a piece of his tail out. And I knew there's no other squirrel that had that there. So Squeaky lived a long time. Huh? Yeah, long live Squeaky. Huh?
So which farm did you get electricity, and where in the farming did you switch from horsepower to vehicles and tractors or engines?
Well, we got electricity at the second farm that we lived at, the one that I remember the most, and it was the one east of the river, the Neshonobatna River.
It was about 47,
I would think so.
yeah. It
And
was after we were married.
oh, no.
Yes, it was. It
No,
was too.
no.
We didn't have electricity when,
I remember you and Bill blowing all the fuses out with a penny up it.
Yeah,
And you wouldn't have been married
yeah.
at that time.
We got electricity when we lived on that farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but not over there where Bill's,
No.
where Rob is
No,
now.
no. So that's
It
probably
was
what
when
you
we
remember.
were going to school at Strand.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't remember the year at all.
Well, it was probably about 1940.
I
Maybe.
remember when
Maybe.
I saw my first roll of toilet paper. Yeah, you know, that's a big deal. Yeah.
So did Al and Bill farm with horses, or did they always have tractors?
Tractors.
You
Always
had,
had tractors, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
We still had horses on the farm, but
Because
Dad,
we had a cattle drive. Do you remember the cattle drive? Yeah.
oh, yeah,
Dad and the hired man, one of those two, used a team of mules, team of horses, yeah.
yeah. So,
He'd plow the garden and stuff like that with them,
so it was on that farm on the east that
Yeah.
we got
oh, by the
electricity.
way, I was up there last week when Linda and Tom were here.
Uh-huh.
We drove up there
Uh-huh.
that just sold, you know.
No, I didn't know.
Longneckers bought it,
Longneckers, huh?
yeah, from Randolph. And I thought somewhere along the line, I thought it brought 12 million.
Really? Wow.
It's 160 square. The house set in the middle of the 160. I mean, 640. Yeah. And the house set almost a half a mile in.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what direction you wanted to go. You
Yeah.
were still out in the middle of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of corn.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. I'm interested to know, what's the first value of an acre of land that you remember, and when was that?
Al, do you remember the value of an acre of land
First,
that you first remember?
It was in the $75 an acre. Yeah.
what year, do you remember?
Well, that was probably back in the original land that's bought there where Rod lives now was brought off of the railroad at $15 an acre. And the people that owned it, name was Davis. And this lady lost it, her and her husband lost it in the Depression. And it had a nice, great big 2-story brick house, and she burnt the house down. She said if she couldn't live in it, nobody else was going to. So that's where Sandra lives right now, right there. Isn't that the story?
Yeah, she burned it down, so she said nobody could have that house but her.
Yeah, nobody.
So our house is built, which my mom was the architect, and they built it
Yeah,
in 47, I believe, and
Yep.
over the basement.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, Dad used to tell me Dust Bowl stories, and I wanted to know if you guys remembered the Dust Bowl stories, because he would tell me how hard Granny worked to keep the dust from coming in the windows, like hang wet
Right.
sheets over the windows.
Right.
Do you
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I can remember that. We'd hang wet sheets over the windows and roll up like bath towels, get bath towels real wet and,
Yeah.
and roll them up and put them like at the door, you know.
And the windows. too.
Yeah, and windows, yeah. And I can remember as a kid living on the farm, my mother, in order to get us to quiet down in the afternoon, my sister and Jim and I, she would put us all on a pallet on the floor and cover us with wet towels so that we could stay cool, because she didn't have air conditioning. And so, yeah, that's,
We didn't even have a fan.
no. Well, you can't have a fan if you don't have electricity.
That's true.
So, yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, Shells.
So we all have these cookbooks now, Granny Days cookbooks. What were some of your favorite things?
Fried chicken.
Made? Fried
Homemade ice cream.
Watermelon.
Well, when we were milking cows, we had a lot of ice cream. didn't
We did, we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We made
All
our
done
own
by
butter.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We turned our own butter, you know. Yeah, Luke.
Do you remember telling me why you hated the outhouse in August?
Because August is, all the little,
Varmints.
yeah, mostly spiders, all of them hatched in August. It's terrible. And the outhouse was full of little,
Baby spiders.
not good. Anyone else? Okay, I think we're done, David.
Thank you. Thank you so much.